Today's episode is going to be about a serial killer known as the Kansas City Butcher, Robert Berdella. Before we get into things, I wanted to give a quick content warning because this episode is going to be a lot heavier than some of our usual content. It will cover topics such as murder, sexual assault, drug use, animal abuse, just kind of lots of awful stuff. So if you're not wanting to listen to any of that, I totally understand. This episode may not be for you. We're going to avoid going into great detail on any of this, but it will be mentioned, so I just didn't want anybody to be surprised by that. And so let's get started. Welcome to Remnants. This is Emily.
And I'm Kayla.
And it's another Sunday. It's become our recording day, I guess.
It has.
Honestly, it works out pretty well. Like
Schedule-wise.
Schedule-wise. Today, this is a podcast episode that I've researched and topic and all that. That was a really weird sentence. It's a good lead into the fact that we've had a lot of caffeine today.
So what?
So much caffeine. We started the day... Okay. We were going to go to one coffee shop that we saw on Instagram because it has like a coffee flight. And we're like, oh, we should do that.
That sounds fun.
But, I also needed to finish my notes because, of course, I left my notebook that I wrote everything down behind. So I had to retype everything. So we needed space. But we went to this one like llama coffee place, which looked super cute, but it was tiny.
Yeah, like whoever posted the reel on Instagram made it look twice the size that it was. So all the tables were taken, except for one squished in the corner.
Yeah, it's like that fits my entire laptop. Like it looked, I'm not like bragging on the place because it looked really good and the coffee sounded good. I just didn't know what it was. So I want to go back sometime, but it was very small.
It was not great for us wanting to work. It just maybe during a weekday it might have been quieter.
I think so. Yeah.
But
so then we went to a Kansas City really popular local place called Messenger Coffee, which was so packed.
Yeah, everyone else had the same idea as we did.
Yep, so we got coffee there, hung out with my dad for a little bit while I wrote 5 pages of notes, pulled a Kayla.
She did, I'm wearing off on her.
But that was only our first stop, because then after that, once the notes were finished, we went and got more coffee.
Because we were like, well, it's been so long since we had our first coffee, we need another coffee.
Yeah, and since today's episode features a topic that is incredibly local. We went on a slight tour today to kind of go down the street where the crimes that we're going to be discussing actually took place, which was a little disturbing, but we did it.
Yeah.
Very quick drive-by. There's no appropriate way to drive by a crime scene that's in the middle of a neighborhood. But
no,
we drove by and we were like, wow.
The houses are very close together.
Yeah, which is, once we get into the story, you'll see how shocking that is, that everything is just basically arm's length. The houses were basically arm's length from each other, so it's just like, how did this happen? But it did.
And very close to my childhood friend where, she grew up and...
I didn't even hear her.
The
cat
wanted in.
Yeah, so that was part of it. We had to go down the street.
Because I was like, okay, how close was my friend's house to this place? And I mean, it wasn't quite as close as I thought it was, but only a few blocks away.
Yeah, still
on the same street, just a few blocks north.
Yeah, still close enough to be like, oh, small world, I guess, in the worst way possible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's kind of. Did you have any more small talk before we get into this?
I don't think so. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but Emily is keeping me from watching the Chiefs game, the AFC Championship.
I always do, because I'm not a sports person.
So I'm getting updates from my mom right now, but it's probably for the best because I'm so nervous about this game, because, if we win, we go to the Super Bowl. So it's probably maybe better that I'm not watching it.
Yeah, last time we recorded, there was also a Chiefs game going on, and I literally never know. And she's like, I'm missing the game because if you was like, oh, there's a game?
It's just casual.
I'm a horrible Kansas Cityan. I never know.
So, anyways, hopefully when this episode comes out tomorrow, Kansas City's very happy because we're going back to the Super Bowl.
Hopefully. Yeah, that'd be great. Go sports. All right, well,
I guess
let's get started.
Yeah.
Miranda Gray lived a posh life in London as an art student. She was beautiful and everything was perfect. But little did she know that a chance encounter on a bus years ago had earned her the unwanted eye of a man. Freddie Clegg was something of a recluse, but when he first saw Miranda, he knew they were meant to be. Freddie chloroformed Miranda and spirited her away to a remote country home, as you do. The plan was to make Miranda fall in love, which is so romantic. In Freddie's mind, he was the kindest of captors. He wouldn't hurt Miranda or force himself on her. He knew all she needed was the time to get to know him.
Yeah, very gentlemanly.
I know, right?
Chivalrous.
That's how dating should be. We're joking.
We're joking. Yeah, that's like, wait a minute.
Much to Freddie's surprise, Miranda tried to escape multiple times because she's just not a romantic like he is. Whether from a twisted form of Stockholm Syndrome or a desperate attempt to appeal to her captor's sympathy, Miranda eventually played along with Freddie's plot for a while. But one final failed escape attempt saw Miranda locked in the basement for several days. It was there that she fell gravely ill. By the time Freddie went back to check on the woman he claimed to love, it was almost too late. He left Miranda in the basement to consider his options and nearly took her to the doctor. But when he returned to the basement, he found her dead. Freddie reasoned that Miranda brought her own death upon herself. It was her fault, after all, because she would not fall in love with him. Freddie buried her in his yard and then went on to the next woman he could love, beginning the search for someone else he could catch and keep until they saw that he was actually just a good guy and that they could love him. So Robert Berdella was 16 when he saw the 1965 version of the critically acclaimed horror movie The Collector, which was
based on
the plot we just discussed. So he was mystified by this movie, inspired even. But unlike others who watched the movie and fell for it based on its artistry and the horror, Robert was drawn to the idea of having someone of his own to keep. Born in 1949 in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. I don't know how to say that. Robert's early life wasn't all darkness. His father worked as a die setter for Ford Motor Company, which I don't know what that is, but I know Ford Motor Company.
I was going to say, I'm like,
I don't know what
they make cars?
Is. You're like, you dumb bitch.
we need to have a bigger conversation.
Yeah, no, it's a die setter, because I was like, oh, he made clothes, but I was like, Ford Motor Company.
I mean, I guess cars have to be painted. Is that what it is?
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyways, I'm dumb. But his father worked at the Ford Motor Company doing something, and his mother stayed at home to care for him and his younger brother, Daniel. Robert's father was reported to be somewhat cruel, and stories claim that he beat his son with a leather belt. Many also asserted that Daniel was the favored son, and because of this, Robert received more of the brunt of his father's negative attention. In addition to a difficult home life, Robert was often bullied at school because of his intense nearsightedness that forced him to wear extremely thick glasses at the age of 5. Yeah. So he was kind of just an outsider from a very, very early age, and this, I mean, I guess, influenced him. In a lot of ways, it doesn't seem like he has quite as dark of a backstory as you'd expect from somebody who ends up becoming what he does. But there were other claims I've read, and it wasn't always verified everywhere I saw it, but there were claims that later on, like in his early teens, he was molested by a coworker and things like that. So there are other things that could have played into it, but some people maybe just already had it in them, and it doesn't take much
right, because there's sadly a lot of people that have been sexually abused, and they don't all turn into serial killers. So.
Yeah, so that's like it's one of those things, like, it could contribute. Obviously it's not an excuse, but like if somebody's already got something going on, then it just triggers
something.
Yeah
Sadly.
So despite their difficult relationship, when his father died at 39, Robert was bereft. He was only 16 at the time, and the eventual remarriage of his mother filled Robert with anger and resentment. He felt like his mother had betrayed his father and the family. And I find this interesting because later in life, it's kind of said that Robert almost seemed to hate women. Like, to the point where if he was talking to, say, a couple, and, there's a man and a woman, if the woman asked him a question, he would only speak to the man. And it would almost be like the woman wasn't even there, like, wasn't worth his time, which is just so bizarre. It's just like, what his mom do, whatever she do, did that make him hate women, or does it just, he was just an asshole? I mean, obviously he was, but It's just a curious...
Was he taking it out on...
Right.
He couldn't take it out on his mother, so he was... Yeah, I don't know.
Right, it's just like, women aren't worth my time, or whatever. But it's just one of the many, we'll say, interesting things about him. In 1967, Robert moved to Kansas City. He was 18 when he enrolled in the Kansas City Art Institute, hoping to begin his career as a professor. But Robert's definition of art wasn't one that was shared by the school at large. His tastes were dark and tinged with torture. And this is disturbing because I, had a class at the Kansas City Art Institute, so I'd hardly say I'm, familiar with it, but, I've been there and I've explored it, and I didn't know that there was a connection to this story at the time, and it's just, all of these places are places we go to pretty frequently, and it's just...
Yeah, and I didn't realize the dark history that was connected.
Yeah, because a lot of the really bad stuff he initially at least reported doing happened at this school, essentially, because, his art often involved live animals. One of his exhibits, we'll say, involved a duck that he tortured and cooked. And then in another so-called exhibit, he had fellow art students, walk through this maze holding, chicks, baby chickens. And the maze seemed innocent enough until they realized that at the end they were sat and forced to watch, a video so startling that most of them jumped and, squeezed the chickens they were holding.
Oh, God.
To the point, they're so small, they killed some of them. So they just, were bonding with these cute little chicks, and then he's bam!
Scares them into accidentally killing them.
Yeah,
that
makes
is
other people...
traumatic.
I know. And then, somehow those weren't enough to get him expelled, but... The final...
Interesting.
I know.
I guess it was the 60s, and they not expel
It's the 60s, and it's birds, and I guess we eat them, but it's still, unnecessarily cruel.
Yeah.
And some of these stories, a lot of this is a little, it happened, but there's not...
You don't know how much of it is the...
Yeah, and there's not, a very specific timeline, so some of it could have happened closer than it seems, or, it might not have been as chronological... I don't know if the chronological order of this is correct, but these things were reported to various places as happening, and it seems pretty much agreed that the final straw at the Art Institute involved the killing of a dog.
Oh.
And this supposed art project may have been Robert's first, foray into using tranquilizers, which became a key element in his crimes to come.
Do you think if something like this happened nowadays, that person would be on, a police radar for animal abuse?
Yeah, and I think there's just... I think this was before a lot of the...
profiling and stuff is out. Because I'm just trying to think, the school just being well, we're just going to expel this very,
oh, he's just a
weirdo
kooky guy.
I don't know, it's
Yeah, because I think this is close, but before they had a lot of the, indications that, animal abuse and things like that is a precursor to, killing humans and things like that. So I think if that happened now, they'd be this kid
needs to be on a watch list.
Now. But then it just kind of happened, but then he started doing things that even if if that's as dark as he got at the time, moving on, he starts his criminal record with drugs, essentially, because honestly, the animal abuse is the start of it, but the things that get him reported to police initially are the drugs. Yeah. He starts using and dealing marijuana and LSD, and he was arrested for the first time in 1969, but he was only held for 5 days because they didn't have enough evidence to keep him. Which is there's so many of these crimes where somebody does get apprehended, but they're just not held, and if only they knew what was going to happen.
Well, it's kind of in our Felix's Grave episode, which episode 6 a long time ago, but it was saying that serial killer, he was in jail multiple times.
I know, that was almost worse because they knew he'd done really? Specifically the things that he ended up doing again, but they knew that. At least this, it was just drugs and stuff. And
that's true. They didn't know he was capable of murder yet.
Right. So, despite everything that he had done in his time in Kansas City, Robert managed to find himself a cozy home. After leaving the Art Institute, he pursued a career as a chef, and he worked at several local restaurants. So, there's a very good chance that we have been to or have known people who went to restaurants as he was cooking at them, which is just... Because I don't really know if there's a specific... Because there's some claims that, a store he later owns also had a restaurant in it that he cooked for. But I also read that he cooked at a variety of restaurants. So, hard to say. There's a lot of restaurants in Kansas City.
Yep.
He was also a member of the local Chefs Association, and he had helped train several aspiring cooks. So he just had his little fingies and everything. He was also part of a local crime watch association.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't make a note of this one, but on one of the podcasts I was listening to, somebody had said that he was talking to one of his friends and said that he wanted to be a big brother for like the, what's that association called? Like the little Big Sister, Big Brother.
Oh, Big Brother.
Yeah, where you like
sister,
help spend time with the kid.
Yeah, you like mentor kind of, or you're partnered with
he was like, I want to be a big brother, and people were like, you don't even like kids. Why would you want to do that? And then, yeah, it's a good thing he didn't do that, but, you know, just to think that there's somebody like that who's actually, like, so involved in the community still.
Right.
And has friends and, like, a social life. It's just bizarre. So, during all this, he moved into a home in the Hyde Park area on 4315 Charlotte Street. And we were there today.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a nice area. Like you said, the houses are super close together.
All old homes, probably built in the, early 1900s.
Yep. And like as the name would suggest, they kind of all, I guess it surrounds just this park. So you know the area better than I do. But
yeah, it's an old part of Kansas City.
Yeah.
As old as Kansas City can get, I guess. Late 1800s.
Yeah, it's like super close to like the Nelson Atkins Museum, which is a super
pretty
nice
close
museum.
to the plaza.
Yeah, it's nice. It's close to
kind of in between the plaza and the crossroads, if you know Kansas City. So
yeah. I live here and I barely know, but I know that they're there.
But yeah.
But friends of Robert may never have described him as normal, but he had a place within the community, and he was known to frequent local bars and to throw a few parties of his own. So he had a pretty big social circle.
Yeah, he wasn't like a loner type.
Yeah,
right?
like he was, but he wasn't at the same. Like I feel like he wasn't a loner, but I don't know if he had like
close friends.
Yeah, he was kind of probably one of those people that you always saw, but it's just like I just don't know that guy. But he was super involved. He did a lot of stuff. Like he was in the community, so it was just bizarre. Amidst all the extremely strange details of this case, the one thing that I find so weird is that he kind of left his life as a cook and all of that stuff, and he owned a shop for a time, and he called the shop Bob's Bizarre Bazaar. Located in what is now known as the Westport Flea Market, the bazaar was marketed as selling ethnological curiosities from around the world's far corners. Shockingly, the store did very well. I believe it earned Robert about $3,000 a month, which was actually pretty good for that time.
Back then. Yeah. I mean, I take that out.
Like for selling, like he sold antiques and just weird things. Like he did good. Like, and literally that store, the very store, is still there. We almost went there today, but we were kind of running out of time. But we've heard that they might actually still have some of his belongings there, some of the things that were in the shop, some of the things that were in the home. So if you're curious, like, could be there, but the shop itself, it's the same building, it's just a different name. So people today who remember going to the shop say that looking back, the most shocking part of Bob's Bizarre Bazaar was that there was a genuine human skull kept on a shelf. Which is sometimes, innocent. And then sometimes it's like, where'd you get that head?
Yeah, what's that from?
Yeah. So let's move on to the crimes. I'm sure you've probably heard this term before, but, when people mention a criminal's MO.
Yep.
MO stands for modus operandi.
Latin.
Which is Latin for operating method. It's defined as this distinct pattern or manner of work associated with a particular criminal. Most killers, especially serial killers, will do something in a similar way. So their style, for the lack of a better term, may evolve over time, but at the end of the day, there are usually signatures left behind that can tie, the murder back to one person. Robert was a very particular killer. One very important detail I've yet to mention about Robert was that he was gay. He was openly gay and active in the community at the time. This helps define the nature of Robert's crimes because in a lot of ways his murders were very sexually motivated. Therefore, it makes sense that his modus operandi included all victims being male. In total, Robert... No, I don't know why I laughed. In total, Robert
like a nervous
was... Yeah,
tick,
it's just like, I don't
because I realized I laughed earlier, and I was like...
I was like, I didn't mean to laugh there. It's just like, it's a lot. In total, Robert was responsible for the deaths of 6 men. Each were Caucasian, and they were between the ages of 8 and... No. Let's try that again. In total, Robert was responsible for the deaths of 6 men. Each were Caucasian between the ages of 18 and 22. These men were either sex workers or acquaintances of Robert. They were men he lured under false pretenses, men he tricked and drugged into captivity. And a lot of it was the situation, like, he'd maybe bring somebody to his house and offer them a drink and stuff, and sometimes the drinks would be laced, but he'd kind of get the person in more of a compromising situation, and then he'd knock them out with something. And then he would literally, like, lock them in the basement, chained to a bed or something like that. Like, jeez. It was... And I don't know, like, he almost made it seem easy, like, just taking these people. It will be difficult to fully discuss the natures of Robert's crimes, not because, like... we don't know a lot of it, but rather because we know it in excruciating detail. Like, he literally kept logs of everything he did to each person, like, fully written, to the point where he had codes. Like, I didn't write down specifically what they were, because you can know every single detail of what he did, and I'm not going to say everything, because he'll tell you what he did with what. Wow. And we're going to get into details, and just know that I'm excluding things, so that's how bad it is. But, like, he kept written logs, he took pictures, and he kept everything. So there's, like, not a lot of mystery there.
That's what he did.
Yeah. So, despite having 6 people who died by his hands, there is a 7th victim of the Butcher of Kansas City, a man who set off the investigation into the Charlotte Street home by somehow managing to escape. Christopher Bryson was 22 when he was captured by Robert Berdella. It was March 29th, 1988. He was held captive for a total of 4 days and endured torture comparable to stuff you'd see in, like, a Saw or a Hostel movie.
God, 4 days.
Yeah, and that's not even the longest he kept somebody. Like, we'll get into that. But Chris was sexually assaulted repeatedly and subjected to beatings. These beatings included being stabbed with hypothermic needles and injected with Drano and animal tranquilizers. He was tortured by electrocution and stabbed in the ear with an object that he believes to be a coat hanger. Berdella wanted to keep Chris alive as long as possible, so when the torment made him sick, Berdella would give him ice baths to fight off the fever and inject him with penicillin. And actually giving, like, his victims antibiotics is not an uncommon thing. He did that with some of his other victims, and that will come into play with... I mean, he kept one of them for almost a month.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Chris escaped while Robert was away at work. He'd noticed a box of matches Robert had left behind and used it to burn through his bindings. He jumped through the home's second-story window and was found running naked through the streets by neighbors wearing nothing but a dog collar. And we saw those streets. Like, they're narrow. There's houses everywhere. Like, that's why I was like, I can't imagine it happening, like, right here.
Like, how did they not hear, like, screaming and stuff? And I guess unless he gagged them and stuff, but still.
Yeah, and they were drugged so often, like...
Yeah. Ugh.
But still, like, at the same time, it is so impossible not to imagine hearing something. And obviously they didn't, or at least they didn't.
Well, or they didn't do anything if it was heard.
Yeah, like, did they not do anything? Did they think it was something that was consensual? Like...
Right.
Or they're like, oh, that guy's weird, he has weird parties, let's just ignore it, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I remember taking a self-defense class when I was in middle school, and they said you should always yell fire and not help, because people are more likely to come search out the issue if you're yelling fire instead of yelling help.
Just so crazy.
Which is like...
She's like, that's great.
We're learning that as like a 12-year-old, which is probably just interesting. But
I don't remember the name or anything, which is horrible. I'd have to look it up. But there is a case of a woman who got, like, literally, I think, stabbed and possibly raped right outside of a building, like an apartment building, and people heard it, but they were too scared to go help her. It was just like something like a bystander's theory or something, where people were too scared to get involved that they'd sooner just let a person just die than go do anything. Which obviously it isn't everybody, but it then plays into the, like, maybe it is go against human nature too much to put them in that sort of risk. So if you yell fire, maybe...
So because
once they're there.
Because I guess when somebody yells help, you don't know what does that mean versus fire. It's like, okay,
and I guess
that's a specific thing.
Yeah, and I guess like if it were like a guy yelling help, I'd be like, that's a trap. I'm not gonna go help that guy. If it's a woman, maybe I do it, but
then like probably, I don't know. Like if I was alone, I don't know if I would go search it out. I mean, I'd like to think I'd call 911 and be like, hey, I heard some like screaming like next door, like. Can you go investigate it?
Like, I'd like to think I'd do something, but also I've never been in that situation. So it's like, I don't know. But, yeah, who knows if anybody heard anything, or maybe if he did get them in the basement before things got too insane, maybe they just really couldn't hear. Because if it's a Kansas City basement, that's probably literally just dug into the earth.
Yeah, especially those old homes. They're more like cellars. Mm-hmm. So I don't even know if they have windows or those very tiny windows. And so it could be pretty soundproof.
And there are some people that he did have ways of silencing them that we'll get into. So, yeah.
Getting ahead of myself.
Yeah. So, that's kind of what happened with Chris and kind of his escape. Robert's other victims were Jerry Howell, Robert Sheldon, Mark Wallace, James Ferris, Todd Stoops, and Larry Wayne Peterson. Each of these men were tortured in similar and even worse ways than Christopher Bryson. We know what happened to each of them in detail because of the slews of damning evidence confiscated from Robert's home when police kind of raided it. In addition to those torture logs I mentioned, they found Polaroid photographs that I unfortunately discovered are findable right now. I didn't find all of them, but I was researching some articles and I found a crime scene photo of an actual person, and I did not want to see that. There's also, so yeah, be careful when you Google this, because it's hard to see, but I found a picture of a head as well. And that's just on regular Google searches, so if you don't want to see that, don't open up too many articles, because that was a fun surprise this morning. So... In addition to logs, torture devices, a library on witchcraft, a satanic ritual robe, and a human skull were confiscated from Robert's home. And that was before they found what was buried in the backyard. So we're going to back up a little bit and go into the actual murder victims in the case. Again, I'm not going to go into everything, but I do want to run through because I think the timeline is terrifying, but also very interesting, because this wasn't like a one and done thing. This spanned, I think it spanned several years. So it's just kind of disturbing to see, and you can kind of see him develop as a killer almost, because it's just like, it's bizarre. On July 5th, 1984, he captured 20-year-old Jerry Howell. Jerry was electrocuted, raped, and killed by asphyxiation a day later. April 10th, 1985, he took 18-year-old Robert Sheldon and kept him prisoner for 5 days. During this time, he endured similar torture to Jerry, but was also subjected to having Drano injected in his left eye. He was asphyxiated with a plastic bag. Yeah, it's bad. And a lot of this, he said he did it just to find out what would happen.
I mean, that's a true psychopath. Yeah. No empathy, I guess, and just...
Yeah, a lot of it, he was literally just experimenting to see, what will this do to a person? And I'm not even going into, there are more details available, and this is as detailed as I wanted to get. So June 22nd, 1985. So again, this is...
So they're kind...
Bam. Yeah, it escalates a lot in 1985. 20-year-old Mark Wallace was taken, assaulted, and murdered the next day. September 26, 1985. Walter James Ferris, 20, was taken, tortured, and asphyxiated the next day. So here, Robert's MO changed a little bit, and this is the following year. So June 17th, 1986, he kidnapped 21-year-old Todd Stoops. And when I say kidnapped, it was probably one of those situations where he either
lured them.
Yeah, so it wasn't like he kidnapped them off the streets necessarily. It might have been from a bar, or he invited somebody back home or something like that, and then from there... things escalated. So he took 21-year-old Todd Stoops and he kept him prisoner until his death on July 1st. So that was June 17th to July 1st. Todd was treated like the rest, but he also had Drano injected in both of his eyes and his voice box. And that was kind of an attempt to silence him. like we mentioned.
Yeah.
Unlike the others, he died of exsanguination, which means he essentially bled out. July 9th, 1987, he took Larry Wayne Pearson, 20, and he held him prisoner for nearly a month, torturing and assaulting him before murdering him by asphyxiation on August 5th. Robert kept his head.
Yes, I can see that escalating.
Yeah, so the time extended for those last two. So I hate to say he perfected it, but whatever he was trying to do, I think he was getting, I don't know if that's when he introduced like using antibiotics or something to extend it, or if he just realized that he liked torturing people rather than just immediately killing them, but whatever the case. Robert's next and final victim was Christopher Bryson, who he kidnapped on March 29th, 1988. So...
It's also interesting, it might just be coincidental, but like they're all in the spring and summer.
I didn't think about that.
Which is, I don't know if that means anything, but that's just interesting.
That is interesting. I didn't think about that. Yeah, I wonder if that's like something to do with just when he felt, I hate to say like felt the urge more, but that's kind of what it is a little bit like. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, because it's like, I don't know, serial killers are fascinating. It's like, how could he go like a year in between? Like,
Yeah, because it was kind of like 1985 was definitely the peak for him, but then he had one a year essentially after that.
Yeah, I guess that was enough to satisfy him. I don't know. It's weird.
It's so weird to think. Like, I can't... Yeah.
It's fascinating because you want to understand, but then I don't want to understand. Like, because there's just no understanding that makes it right. Yeah. But
it is important to note that these are only Robert Berdella's known victims, and it's very likely that there are other deaths he was responsible for.
Because that's true.
I mean, it's hard to say because he did keep such exact documentation of these ones that maybe there weren't anymore, but I don't know. I mean, maybe he only started that after he got a taste for it. It's so hard to say. Like,
right.
But that's kind of, and that's like a very high overview of the stuff he did. Like there are claims that he like put bleach in people's eyes, that he gouged them out literally just to see what would happen. And it was also a way to try to like control them because he wanted somebody who did everything he told them. That was his goal. It's a lot like Dahmer, which I thought was a kind of an interesting connection because they're really similar in a way. They just wanted somebody like essentially a sex slave. That's what they wanted. So, yeah, that's kind of the overview of that. Once his victims had died, Robert would dispose of their bodies in similar ways. He'd drain them of blood by either hanging them in the basement or keeping them in a tub. And then he cut the bodies into pieces and set the body parts out in trash bags to be taken and disposed of when garbage trucks came by. So, imagine that just sitting on the curb. He kept some pieces, like the head he had in his upstairs closet, and he had some bones scattered in the backyard. He also would keep like IDs and wallets as trophies. So, yeah.
Oh my god, that cat scared me.
The door's closed and Kira just tried to escape.
It was like so intense into the story.
I know. These stories kind of tend to scare me more than the paranormal ones sometimes.
Absolutely, because it's freaking real people.
I know, and you wish it wasn't, but it is. So, once the story came to light, Kansas Cityans began to fear that Robert Berdella had cooked and fed his victims in restaurants, a veritable Sweeney Todd in Kansas City. This is likely just a tall tale, though. We hope. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of body parts that just disappeared, so...
Yeah.
Hard to say. Because, I mean, I don't know if he's the kind of guy who'd even cared to lie and say that he just threw them away if he did actually cook them. I think he'd rather just be like, yeah, I fed people, my victims, so what?
Right. Like, it does seem like he'd be that kind of person. So if he didn't admit to that, then it probably...
Because he admitted basically everything.
I mean, I think it'd be pretty hard, unless you, like, owned a restaurant and you're the sole cook. I think it would be kind of hard to sneak in an arm.
This meat, don't worry about it.
Yeah, like, so probably.
But I do get the fear, for sure. Robert was arrested on April 2nd, 1988. He was
a month before I was born.
Well, there you go. You just barely made it out of him being around. He was sentenced to life without parole and imprisoned in the Missouri State Penitentiary. His sentence was cut short, though, as he died in prison on October 8th, 1992, at the age of 42, of a heart attack. Apparently, Robert was claiming that the prison guards were withholding his heart medication from him.
Good.
I know, that's what I was like, but honestly, like, oh,
I don't care.
Yeah.
Sorry, not sorry.
But that's just another awful person. Like, if we go investigate that for paranormal stuff, like, the people that were there and died there were legitimately evil.
Yeah.
And we're gonna, like, try to go and talk to them.
Yeah.
Like, that's probably one of the worst places to investigate. Probably worse than the demons, because they're more likely to be real.
Yeah. But I still want to go.
What does that say?
What does that say about me?
No, it's even worse that I'm like, I hope they know what cell he was in. But I don't know if I want to talk to him. He probably wouldn't talk to us anyways, though, because we're women. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, obviously, everything about Robert's disturbing, but another disturbing thing about him is I don't think he ever felt bad about what he did. He once described his crimes as his darkest fantasies becoming reality. So that's kind of what it was from him. It was a dream come true. He'd always wanted to enact the plot of that movie, The Collector, and he did. Like, he's known as the Butcher of Kansas City, but I also saw that one of his aliases is The Collector.
Wow.
And he's not the only serial killer who associates that movie with them becoming a serial killer.
Interesting.
Which is like, I don't usually buy media influencing people like that, but I mean,
I think if it wasn't that, it would have been something else.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly he was most likely born a psychopath, and there was nothing that could have...
Like, maybe it was where he realized, he was like, I like this for not the reasons I should, but I still like it. So there are a lot of people, a lot of criminals who also, like, tie their behavior and their crimes to Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
Which that one's not necessarily quite as obvious as The Collector, which is about a killer, but it's interesting when people are like, yeah, this thing inspired me so much. So, I keep saying so. That's my so.
Well, I don't know. I feel like it maybe is better. I'm the girl, so.
Yeah, I'm just like, so, that's what I need to work on. Robert's home was purchased by Kansas City businessman and millionaire Delbert Dunmeyer in November 1988. I've never heard of him, but apparently he's, like, got his hands in a lot of stuff in the community. Huh. Or did. He's probably dead, honestly.
Well, yeah, it's 35 years ago.
Eventually, his home became known as the House of Horrors, but it was demolished, thank goodness. Now the vacant spot where Robert Berdella's home once sat is painfully obvious, just a small lot between two charming Hyde Park homes, which we can verify.
I think that would be so weird to be in one of those homes on either side, which I'm sure it's not the original owners anymore. I'm sure it's been numerous owners since the 80s, but
just knowing that,
and, like, is there still anything in the backyard? Right. I mean, I'm sure the police were pretty thorough, but...
Well, and I don't know. Curious, because... And I didn't tell this part of the story. I don't remember which of the victims it was. One of the victims, and I think it's one of the ones that died, was an acquaintance of Robert. And he went by Bob, obviously. With Bob's. It was the first time I think I brought it up, other than Bob's Bizarre. But they mentioned that this guy was, like, hiding out in Robert's shed because he, like, didn't have a place to stay or something, so he was trying to hide there, and then Robert found him, and he was trying to be all buddy and nice and be like, oh, come in, you can stay with me, because he did that a lot. He tried to be super nice, and he mentioned how he tried to rehabilitate these men he knew who were, like, sex workers and things like that, which obviously was
then why did he kill some of them and not others? Like, right. I mean, we'll probably never know, and even if we knew, we wouldn't understand, but...
Yeah, so the reason I bring it up, though, is... Did they tear that shed down, or is it the shed that's still standing that we saw? Because I don't know if there's that blue house, and then they have a blue shed, and I'm like...
Isn't the same shed?
I know, because it's kind of, like, almost in the middle a little bit. I was like, did they leave the shed? Because it's a serial killer shed, if that's the case.
But it's possible.
I don't know. Yeah, but I saw something. Somebody... I think it was a Reddit post I was reading about this, and they commented, just like, oh, the neighbor got a much bigger driveway out of this, I guess.
Yeah, because it's not like, I mean, it's obvious that that lot is kind of empty space, but it's not big enough for a home, so clearly, like, yeah. Right. Yeah.
And it's, like, kind of, I mean, obviously it's horrible, but as far as, like, being the people that own those two houses now, I know we can't be the only people who've driven by because we know what that is, because the address is everywhere.
Right.
And I'm sure there are plenty of people who stop and get out of the cars and walk on the lot, too. So it's like, how often are they dealing with people like us who are just freaking weird and know the story and like, I want to see it.
Yeah, I want to see it. Enjoy by.
Yeah, like,
but we didn't get out of the vehicle,
no,
so.
I felt bad enough for driving by it because it did feel like ogling something horrible. But at the same time, like, we're talking about it, and I wanted to visualize it.
Well, so yeah, sometimes you're just like, yeah, you just want to visualize, like, where this place was.
And it's just insane realizing how close all of this is. Like, it's just literally here. And, you know, that kind of ties into my last point. Even though I didn't grow up in the Kansas City area, this story just really throws me for a loop because it just all happened around the time our parents were young and going out and about and all that.
Yeah.
Like, my dad knows someone who said they were at a party with Robert Berdella, and that's just so scary to think about.
Right.
Like, honestly, it brings to mind, and I don't know if it's just a statistic or a quote, but we'll just say it's a statistic that the average person will walk by 36 murderers in their lifetime. Like, it's so wild to think how often you can just be walking by or just in the same room as someone doing something like what Robert Berdella was doing behind closed doors, and like,
I had no idea.
You think it doesn't happen, but it does all the time. There's so many houses in a single neighborhood, and like, what's happening? There's a house in the Northland right now where 3 men just died in the backyard, froze, and
yeah, they're still trying to figure that out. So that'll be really
it's just I
mean,
an
that's
average looking house, like every
and
house
in a very normal looking neighborhood, like nothing suspicious.
It's just like this stuff just happens, and we don't know why, and you would never expect it, but it's unfortunately more common than you think. And then it goes back when we were paranormal podcast hosts. A lot more places should be haunted. Maybe everything's haunted.
Probably is. I think I saw something on Instagram a while back that was like someone from the UK being like, you Americans freak out about hauntings. Like, everywhere in Europe is haunted. Like, our history is not that old in comparison. So.
Yeah. They say that, and our history is, I mean, not ours necessarily, but the land's history is actually just so old still, too. It's just less
physical buildings
like
and
less
stuff.
Physical reminders of it, because everything here is such a new build, or we tore stuff down or whatever, destroyed it. But literally every single inch of this country should be haunted, because it's just, there's so much killing. But that's the majority of that story. If you guys kind of want to get more of the nitty-gritty details, there's lots on it. You can find articles, there's podcasts that go into everything, to the point where I was just like, I don't feel like I should be listening to this. This is
just too far.
Yeah. So if you want to do that, I don't know. That's a second true crime episode I think we've done.
Yeah.
Trying to keep the true crime ones more local. There are a few others I'd like to discuss, but they're harder. I know we try to keep kind of overall the mood lighter.
Lighter, yeah.
So it's difficult for us to find that, trying to be respectful with the fact that we diffuse with humor. So hopefully we kept it respectful, because obviously that was awful and a horrendous story. And yeah, so
but it is kind of, because we really do want to go to Missouri State Penitentiary sometime this year, so it is kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, useful to know about maybe some of the history of some of the cellmates.
It's like sobering to think about, like, and it's easy to forget that prison was being actively used in the 90s. Like, like, you think about it, like, oh, that's an ancient prison. Like, no, it's not. Like, I mean, it is, but it was being used.
Still active,
so
in our lifetime.
We have to go there, because he's just one of the awful people. And it makes so much sense why people get such negative activity there. Like, the people were monsters in life, and, like, what are they now? Like,
are they still around? Or this is where I do hope hell exists for people like that. I
know. Like, if they're ghosts, then it is almost sad. It was like, no, you're not supposed to be here.
You need to be tortured yourself for the rest of eternity.
Well, I've been on such a big true crime kick. I'm going to segue a little bit again, but there's one, I've listened to one documentary. I don't know if you've ever heard of Christopher Watts, but he, like, murdered his whole family and his 2 little girls, and he's not allowed much in his cell, but one thing he is allowed, and I think it's part of his punishment, is he has pictures of his family, and he literally says that, is my diffuser going off? He literally says that at night he can see, like, the ghost of his daughter dancing in his cell, essentially. So it's like, maybe hell is being left behind, and, like, maybe even if your spirit is on Earth or something, maybe they're still being tormented. It's just maybe it's...
I guess that's true. I mean, we don't know what the...
different than we'd understand.
Right.
Or maybe they're just stuck here and then stuck elsewhere, and it's just eternal torment in every location. You could still be in prison forever, so... That's
true. Like,
I don't know.
We don't know what the afterlife is.
Yeah, but when we go there, I guess we'll find out if we...
connect at all.
Yeah, we can... We know a few triggering things. We could play clips from the movie.
Yeah, right?
Oh, God, that's horrific. Okay, so...
Anyways.
There we go. True crime, done. What do you think? Did you like it? Like murder?
I've always been... I'm not as much into the true crime as you, but I think it's just human, morbid curiosity. I think we all are kind of interested in true crime to a certain degree, because I think I more like it from, like, a profiling perspective. Yeah. Like, what makes a person do that?
Yeah, like, I find that very interesting. And there's, like, I need to find it. There's a book about him. Like, I think from my perspective, I feel like I want there to be more that makes sense, that made him this way, and I just feel like there isn't.
Right, and sometimes I think, I think, so, I always kind of forget the difference a little bit between a psychopath and a sociopath, but I just find it's fascinating, because they're just born that way, and I don't think there's anything you can do.
Yeah, and, like...
And so then what do you do with those kind of people they're just born that way?
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of those people think they're somehow better than or above or different from other people, so, like, of course I can do this, like...
And they have no empathy, so they don't care. Yeah, and you can't make them care.
Yeah.
Because...
Or life just doesn't mean anything to them, so it doesn't matter if they... It's just hard to say, but yeah, I'm interested in that aspect, too. Like, I always say that I wish I'd had more time before high school and college, where I'd given enough time to realize, like, oh, I'm really interested in this. I wish I'd done stuff like criminology and stuff in college, but I didn't know I liked it until I was older.
Right.
Like, I feel like early 20-year-olds shouldn't be allowed to make important decisions, because they just force us into, like, pick your life direction now.
Right. It's like, what am I supposed to know what I want to do at 18?
I had no idea what I liked. But,
yeah.
Man, that's all I got for you. Probably need to, like, take a long shower and cry tonight or something. Hopefully I don't have nightmares.
You can read your new book.
Yeah.
Maybe that
might help.
Escape to another world.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess.
Well,
I don't even know how to close this one. It's just like we usually try to be silly again at the end, but I've got no silliness. I spent the morning reading about this guy, and then we talk about it. It's just been too much of that today, I think.
Yeah. This isn't necessarily silly, but, like, before we got started, Emily's two cats were, like, staring at me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it might have just been, like, they wanted me to pet, but usually they'll, like, get on my lap or something, but they were just, like, very intensely staring at me, and I was like, I don't know, this kind of creeped me out.
Yeah, they usually don't, like, tag team, but one was on the bed, one was on the floor, and they're just sitting staring at her, and we're both convinced now that Kayla's the one that's more haunted. Because she's just been having a lot more happening.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I was having stuff, but I almost feel like mine was directly associated with the Sally house, and we haven't been back for a while.
My lights have been flickering a lot in my house. So, I sent you that video of my lamp flickering that one morning.
Yeah.
And I'm still not convinced. I think it might be my lamp, because it's happening somewhat frequently. But yesterday I was getting ready, and the lights in my bedroom flickered, which has never happened before.
Bish is haunted.
And it could just be...
The dolls, man. Things got worse since you brought the dolls in.
Freaking, it's because you wouldn't take them.
Mm-mm. I don't want that. I hate dolls on a good day, and we brought something into those dolls. After we did that whole EVP session, like, not even the spirit box session, I'm like, I'm not keeping that.
That is something, like, to plug our Patreon, but not plug our Patreon. I really want to record us listening again to that Haunted Dolls spirit box section, because when we listened to it again, we definitely heard more than we did initially, and
you're like, that was
I'd like to debrief that, and maybe that could be some Patreon content we do, but...
Yeah, and going back to that, like, we've talked about, because our, it'll probably be once we start doing this recording thing, but every time we go through our evidence, we find way more than we anticipate.
Oh, yes.
So we want to try to start recording that, because our live reactions are always like, oh my God, what the hell is that?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm saying, like, once we start doing that, we're just going to stop getting stuff ever.
Yeah.
Once we record ourselves. But, I mean, to date, we always end up getting something shocking. And, like, Hall of Waters, Kayla's still sending me stuff. Like,
yeah, I mean, I guess in a way I could almost, like, play that. But, like, for Instagram, I've been posting our EVPs, you know, slowly the last few weeks. That we got from Hall of Waters, and so I was enhancing one of the audios on my laptop yesterday, and I swear we got another EVP, because I turned it up all the way trying to find the one EVP, and it's like, oh my God, there's another one that's happened right before, but we didn't hear it till I turned up the volume really high.
Yeah, so that place is just insanity.
So how much more of that have we gotten from other places? Or that place is just that insane?
We need a good investigation. It's been a while.
It has been. I think before this season wraps out, I think we're going to talk about an investigation we went on. It was kind of a fail of an investigation, but I think it'll be an episode for this season, I think.
There is no question mark. It was failed.
I still haven't listened to our digital recorder. I'm pretty sure even if there is something on there, I won't be able to verify if it's true or the Haunted Mansion gimmicks.
It would be so hard to parse the truth from that. But
it was such an entertaining night. I kind of want to talk about it. It might not be as entertaining to people that weren't there.
We can definitely talk about it. It'll be something. If anything, it was a lesson well learned.
It was. That don't trust every place that is open for investigations.
Yep. We gained several stories, laughs, and potentially asbestos
Maybe we should make that our
along the
next
way.
episode, because it would be a nice lighthearted one to do after this.
That's a good point, yeah.
Because the other topic I want to do is, I don't know if it's heavy, but, you know, it's talking about a gate of hell, so that's not...
Oh, that's not light.
That's not light.
Yeah, that's a bit heavy. Yeah.
So maybe our next episode should be
Gate
our...
of hell, casual.
Our failed...
Is it Stoll Cemetery?
Stoll Cemetery, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But, anyways, I guess we've Midwest goodbye you long enough.
Well, if we didn't, we'd be off-brand.
Should we try our new catchphrase?
Do we have a new catchphrase?
Yeah, catch you at the crossroads.
Is that? Oh, catch you at the crossroads. I'm still pretty attached to catch you, or what do I say? God, I don't even know. I guess I'm not attached to it, am I?
Catch you on the flippity flip.
Yeah, catch you on the flippity
Isn't that
flip.
how Nick always ends our D&D session?
Maybe that's where I picked that up from.
Yes, it's Nick ends our friend Nick. That's how he ends our D&D sessions.
Like,
and I don't know if he's gotten that from somewhere.
I don't know. That's definitely where I got it from then. Cause like, I don't know why this is on my head and why this is how I end podcasts, but that's totally when we were recording our D&D podcast. I was like, so this is how podcast must be ended. Catch you on the flippity flip.
Yep.
Oh, God damn it. It's Nick's fault.
Well, I always found it funny too. It's like related, not related, but like former friend used to say, well, time to hit the dusty road.
I have to stop myself from saying that sometimes. It's like, that's so far removed from something I should be saying.
But it always made me laugh, and it still makes me laugh.
I know. Because it was just a very obvious in his mind. It's like, this has gone way too long.
So he'd be like, time to hit
Did the thigh slap?
Yep.
Time to hit the dusty road?
I think that's what he said.
I was like, where the fuck did you come up with that? God damn it, I didn't know the flippity flip was something I stole from Nick.
But then I'm like, did Nick steal that from somewhere? Or is that a Nick original?
Next time we see him, we'll be like, hey, Nick.
Yeah.
You forced this into my vocabulary. I must know.
It's definitely not something we could just Google.
No. I've heard people say it, but...
Yeah. It might just be one of those things that's not from somewhere specific. It's kind of just like, a phrase, but...
I have a hoof.
You do. It's our little cap for our microphone that we can't decide if it makes it sound better or not. I think it's a little hat for the microphone. I think it makes it sound worse, actually, which is backwards from what it should. But.
Oh, well, we're still rambling so much, so I have one final thing. We can close on this.
Yes.
Don't ask me why this happened. It was just a random conversation topic that came up last night, and I just thought of it because of the hoof. Okay, when you hear hoof beats, do you think of a horse or a zebra?
Definitely a horse. Okay,
when someone asked me that question, and I just... Association said the first thing that came to mind, I was like, well, actually, I think of the goat man. So...
What does that say about you?
I don't know. Because it's literally the first thing I pictured.
You pictured
little goat man. So, yeah, that's how we're going to end that then. So, bye. I got a foot cramp.
It's your hoof.
My hoof. I'm becoming a goat.